Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Touchpoint Group industry snapshot looking at the banking app performance in the UK market for April of 2022. With me, I've got Nick Young, who's our lead consultant out of the UK. And the standout performer, Nick, for April has really been Nationwide, hasn't it? In fact, probably the standout story over the last 6 months.
I think that's right, Glenn. I mean, before we get into Nationwide, let's just look at the UK market. I'm calling them legacy banks to distinguish them from challenger banks. These lines represent their average monthly engaged customer rating from App Store data. You can see it's a complicated picture, but reading from the top, the grey line is Lloyd's, and generally speaking, they had a little bit of a dip in March, but they've been more or less the leader throughout this period. But the great challenger for them has been Barclays, which is the orange line, which has actually been ahead for most of the past 3 months. But the interesting one to us is the brown line, which has come from nowhere in November with an average app rating of 3.5. This is nationwide, of course, and is now right up there in the mix. You can see it's cheek by jowl with Lloyd's and even above Barclays by the end of April. I would stress this is all incredibly recent data that we've just downloaded. So you are looking at the very most recent picture, which undoubtedly has in April, Nationwide and Lloyd's as more or less joint number one.
Let's dig into Nationwide then, shall we? See what they've been doing.
Should, yeah. It's an interesting story. So let's see how they managed to get there. I mean, one of the obvious things to do is just look at the mix between iOS and Android. Clearly, Nationwide's ratings improvement, customer experience improvement, has been very much biased towards iOS. So they moved from 2.8 all the way up to nearly 4. Just that's sort of at least 100 basis points growth through iOS, whereas Google hasn't done anything like that. And then, I mean, the other way of kind of trying to disinter this to make sense of it is to look at these for what we call customer experience hierarchy levels. So you've got like level 1 of the fundamental attributes, things like reliability and security and usability. Then we've got core customer journeys, which are the tasks that the app is really has to solve for the customer in order to be viable. So these are things like balance checking, mobile app updates, authentication, getting into the app, and so on. Then we've got the things that the app is really there to support, which are all the incremental features around managing your money in a current account. So transferring funds, getting statements, paying people, paying bills, and so on and so forth. And lastly, I guess what at the end of the day really matters to the bank, which is this concept of customer love. So it's the emotional affinity customers have for the brand. This is interesting because we're looking at Nationwide, and this shows you effectively where they've moved the needle most in this past 6 months. They've moved it a bit in foundational attributes. They've actually gone slightly backwards in incremental banking features. They've been more or less steady in customer love, but they're very high in customer love, as most of these brands are, because they're solid high street banks. The one where they've really kind of moved the needle is in core customer journeys. So let's go and drill down there a little bit more. So these are the 4 main dimensions to customer journeys. Mobile app update is the one where they seem to have done the most. Again, they've slightly moved down, but this isn't really impactful in terms of authentication, app check account balance feature, and deposit check. They actually have deposit check, so they don't have that functionality. So this is fairly neutral. What the impact means is this is the contribution that particular attribute has made to the change in the overall score. So if you remember, we said they'd improved their overall score by about 90 points overall and 100 points in iOS. So mobile app update has contributed around a fifth of that, pretty significant. And I guess you're asking, what is mobile update all about?
Exactly.
What is it that customers are saying? Because it's a bit of a kind of generic term. So let's look at that. Now we can see what customers are actually saying about it, and you can see what matters to them is that the app is up to date. That when they do get an update, there's some benefit, like as the second comment says, it now shows, where the transactions are originating, where the money is originating those transactions, I think it means. And then, that the update experience is fairly painless. And we've seen, examples of apps where the update is a real pain and customers have to log in or all over again, or even completely uninstall and reinstall. But really the customers are just saying, look, you've got a great new update process, and the latest update seems to represent a kind of material improvement on the previous versions. So kudos to Nationwide. They've really, I think, focused on this one particular aspect, the customer journey aspect of the customer experience and mobile app updates in particular, and just doing something really quite simple but very well has fueled this rather impressive growth over the past 6 months.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And maybe if we can go back to that first screen again, showing all of those legacy banks, because it's really interesting to show how doing something simple well can have such an impact on that customer experience. And if we've seen anything across the UK and the US over the last few months, it is not managing that update or a refresh process well can have a dramatic negative impact on that experience as well. So it's an area fraught with risk, and they seem to have handled it incredibly well.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, that is a good little snapshot at that legacy sector of the UK market for April 2022. We do these every single month. So if you want to keep up to date and you want to get more of these, jump through to our site where you can subscribe to get first dibs on each of these as we release them. And we'll look forward to catching up with you next month. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Glenn.